So hello everyone, I'm Alban Gilletta, a PhD student for the work package 2 on this module projects about numerical modeling of saline and sediment transport close to offshore wind component. So small scale modeling. So first of all, a little word about the context. So the motivation of this project is to better understand what is scar process. According to a study done in the US, almost half of the bridge failure are caused by flood and scar process. For instance, you have on this picture a collapse of one bridge over the Saint-Étienne River during the cyclone Gamed on the Rhine Island on 2007. And you can imagine that when you have an offshore wind farm, for instance, the one at Fécamp during the Chiron storm, where waves were up to 10 meters, a lot of scar process can happen in these situations. So in this video, you can see a different configuration about what happened when we place a cylinder around a flow. So this is a video where you can see different type of vortex shading process. So namely in the wake, and you see that when you increase the speed of the cylinder or of the flow, some turbulence instability happens, notably the von Karman alley street based on the vortex shading. So this vortex shading process appears when you have a sufficient Reynolds number, which is on the formula on the right, based on the velocity, the diameter of the pile, and the viscosity. And in the offshore wind farm of Dunkirk, obviously, this threshold is completely overestimated, and we got a Reynolds number, a pile Reynolds number, up to a very turbulent flow and turbulent wake at the end. So it's supposed to have this vortex shading process. Upstream the pile, we have the so-called Offshore vortex. So here you have a picture about an experiment done for a certain Reynolds number. When you have a turbulence vertical structure that goes around the pile and is really responsible for sediment scour process upstream the pile. Here on the right plot, you have a slice, I would say, on the symmetry plane of the previous picture. And you can see that the offshore vortex is actually formed by several vortices, primary vortex and also secondary vortex that evolves in time. So you can imagine that these structures can pick up some sands and erode what happened in the foundation of the offshore wind turbine. But what happened when you place these structures around sediments? So this is an experiment done in the laboratory, qualitative experiment, when you can see the different vertical structure that I introduced previously. The vortex shading here can put into suspension the particle and lead to a scar downstream the pile. And upstream, you can see the offshore vortex that is taking some sediment upstream and release them downstream on the sides of the structure. And you see that at the end, no more sand is around the structures, and you have a fully eroded foundation, which can damage and lead to a failure. A word about the state of the art in engineering. Currently, what we do to protect those foundations is to design some riprap according to empirical formula. This is one, for instance, the most famous one is the one from HEC 2023. And you can see that on this picture, how can we implement such a riprap? We have to implement a lot of means, boats that carry rocks, and implement that all around the pile. So very huge work to do. What we can do also is to do physical modeling. When here it's done on a flume in a certain flume, when you place a real object, but at different scale, so we can have some scale issue. And also it has an important fact is that we cannot measure everything when you do physical modeling. So in this PhD thesis, I focused only on numerical modeling. To sum up, what's the sketch here gives you the important vertical structure that are responsible for the scour process, namely the vortex shading downstream, and upstream the offshore vortex, which is formed of several vortices like the primary vortex, bottom attached vortex, and also secondary vortex. We actually, during my PhD thesis, try to reproduce those vertical structure according to turbulence modeling. You can see on this video the CFD numerical simulations about the hydrodynamic structures around the cylinder. You can see easily the offshore vortex on the left side and the vortex shading downstream. So we are able, according to numerical simulations, to reproduce those vertical structures. But then we have to add sediment on those simulations. So first, a little bit word about the sediment transport model and how sediment particles are transported. So basically, if you have on this sketch a particle which is faced through the different forces, the driving force according to the velocity of the fluid, and the stabilizing force, which is the weight here. And if you do a ratio between those two forces, you can actually set a so-called Shields number, which demonstrates the level of sediment transport. If the drag force here in blue and the weight force are equivalent to each other, there is a slightly move of the slightly sediment transport only happen in bed load. So the bed load is only the sediments that are transporting in the just above the bed, actually. And it happened at a certain Shields number, which we called the critical Shields number. If you increase the drag force, obviously more sediment will be transported, and usually the Shields number is around 0.3, superior to 0.3, and you have the drag force that is much more important than the weight. And you see that on the picture on the right, that there is a thick layer of sediment particles that are transported along the bed slope. Then there is a different mode of transport. It's called suspended load. It's when the particle begins to saltate, that is to say that jump and goes in the water column, and are interacting with the turbulent eddies that is produced in the flow when you have a highly turbulent flow. So it was a theoretical point of view of the sediment transport, but how can we model that? So in reality, you can see on this sketch, you have the different grains that are together. They are very close to each other when you have a bed, and the more you go up, the leaves they begin to get loose and are able to move actually according to a certain velocity speed of the fluid. Well, when the model that I used is called a two-phase flow model. So we model two phase, one fluid for the water and one solid for the particle. And what we do actually is to do a space averaging of the picture that you see on the left to the picture, and it gives a picture on the right, where each cells corresponds to a certain solid volume fraction, that is to say the percentage of particles that is contained in a cell, and it evolves continuously from the water to the top in the blue with the blue color to the depth, the deepest height of the bed, where it's all yellow, and you have a maximum solid volume fractions, which is equal to 63%. And the model that I use is called set foam. because in numerical modeling you cannot model large-scale process. We focus on our simulations to small scales, and we're trying to reproduce firstly some experiments that have been done before about the score process. So here we're trying to simulate what happened if you put a steady current facing a cylinder. Of here you have the different parameters. For instance, the pile diameter is only 10 centimeters, but we try to reproduce the same Reynolds number, Shields number, etc., etc. You have here the different picture of the scar process around a cylinder in the experiment. So you see that the score mark is all around the pile. And with the experiment, we also have some information about the score depth. So here you have two plots, two figures. On the left, the upstream score depth at the end of the experiment, and on the right, the downstream score depth. So this is an example of one simulation that we can do with a two-phase flow model. And you see that we are able to reproduce the scar process with a score hole that is developing upstream the pile. So the flow is coming from the left here. And you see that at the end, you have a score mass that develops all around the pile. And notably, on the downstream part, you can see the vortex shelling process with the white plume is representing the solid volume fraction that is put into suspension. One important step to do when you do numerical modeling is to validate your simulations according to the experiment. But I was saying previously that we have the information about the upstream score depths. So we try to compare what the results of our simulations with the experiment here in a red dot. So this graph on the right shows the time evolution of the scar depths in time. And you can see that we slightly, at the first stage, over-predict the scar process. But if you extrapolate our simulations, see that the later stage, at 2 hours from the experiment, the furthest point, latest point, we are able to reproduce the same scar depth. So this means that we are able to reproduce the scar process quantitatively. So one objective of the two-phase flow simulations is to upscale, do an upscaling, because we only can focus on the small scales, and we have to imagine some parameterization for larger scale model. So on this plot you can see different on the y-axis the length scale about our simulations, which is around 1 meter. And the time scale, which is around 100 seconds. So in the purple rectangle, you can see where our simulation is placed on this graph. And if we want to upscale our simulations to a larger scale model, we have to find some parameterizations for the sediment transport according to theoretical value, for instance, the Shields number or turbulent variable. So that's exactly what we're trying to do for this upscaling process. Here you have a figure about the amount of sediment that is transported and projected on a horizontal plane around the cylinder. So you can see that the flow is coming from the left and it goes to the right. You can see the difference, the important sediment transport very close to the cylinder. And we can actually calculate with our simulations the amount of turbulence, that is the plot on the below the bed load transport, bed load flux. And you can see that there is clearly some correlations between the two variables. And so if we plot the different informations on the different axes on the figure on the right, you can see that there is a clearly a logarithmic trend between the turbulence that is on the x-axis and the bed load flux in the y-axis. And we are able to find a formula that we can implement in larger scale model to actually model the real sediment transport. Of course, we did that for the steady current case, but in the offshore wind farm context, there is also waves. So we were able to reproduce numerical simulations of waves. So for instance, this video that shows on the upstream, on the top view, the score, the 3D simulations, and on the downstream you have a plane view of the score, the bed elevation evolving in time. And you can see that there is a complete different behavior than the current case. At the end of the simulations, you have a very intense plume in the suspended load, as you can see on the top figure, with a white plume very intense in the water column. And downstream, you can see that the score equilibrium is not totally symmetric because different physical processes took place during this waves flow. So as a conclusion, I would say that score, there is some take-home message, I would say. So score is one of the main risks of the hydraulic structure collapse. We saw that there is almost 50% of the bridge pier in the US that collapsed due to score process. It is directly due to the current structure that are responsible for the digging of the bed. Actually and currently, the score protections such as riprap are estimating with empirical formulas. And if we want to parameterize different formulas to protect the offshore foundations, we have to use physical or numerical models. We saw that with the two-phase flow approach, we succeed in resolving the score process, but we are limited to a small scale. So as a perspective of this work, we have to develop new parametrizations for larger scale model capable of simulating the flow around the full offshore wind farm of Dunkirk. And that's something that Nicolas Michelet is going to talk in the next talk. Thank you for your attention.